Hello, everyone. I thought I would review this book, Warranted Christian Belief, by Alvin Plantinga, who is a very reputable and notable Christian philosopher. In fact, I believe he is one of the best Christian philosophers working today. I mean, in fact, he may even, in fact, be the best. I think he's like 90 years old now, but he's very knowledgeable and he's definitely one of the best thinkers today. And for now this isn't really what I would call a Christian channel or I'm not like a Christian video maker. However, uh, I have committed myself to reviewing books on this channel and on TikTok. So I will review the books that I read, some of which, of course, will be of a Christian nature. And of course, also by learning about my Christian philosophy and beliefs, you will also get to know me more and how that impacts my writing and all of that. Well, recently, I've been very much interested in Christian epistemology. That is, how we come to know the things that we know, the foundation and framework for the things that we know. Because for the longest time, I was only interested in arguments for Christianity or arguments for theism, and also exploring skepticism, arguments against theism for intellectual curiosity's sake, and all of that. But to me, I was missing the point because if someone has a particular kind of worldview, then they will obviously view certain evidence or certain arguments according to that worldview. So if someone has what you might call a skeptical or naturalistic worldview, then they might dismiss evidence for God or arguments for God as not as, for example, not counting as evidence, or that there may be some naturalistic alternative. So very often arguments don't really help in some cases because they're fueled through one's epistemology, through one's worldview. So now, I do think that one should know arguments. That is important. But I think that many Christians jump the gun when it comes to arguments, and whereas I think one must first build up a worldview upon which these arguments can rest. And I also think that it's necessary to have a stronger worldview that can counter a more naturalistic worldview. For example, I have been very much interested of late in transcendental arguments for God's existence, which they're very complex, they're very philosophical, but I'll try to summarize these arguments the best I can. Obviously, I won't be able to give a detailed account. For one, because I'm not an expert in philosophy by any means. I'm really just a beginner in these areas, but an amateur. But I am trying to learn the best I can. But the transcendental argument basically states that God must be a precondition for logic and reason. He must be the foundation for it. And if he isn't the foundation, then that ultimately will result in logical absurdity, because you can't really have that on naturalism or on atheism of any kind. So basically, if God isn't the foundation, then that results in logical absurdity. And of course, that's a very powerful argument, because if one tries to argue against that by using reason and logic, if you have no foundation upon which that can rest, then your entire worldview essentially collapses. If you have a naturalistic worldview. Now, that argument isn't laid out entirely in Plantinga's book. Plantinga's book deals with cognitive faculties. Plantinga's essential argument is that in order for our cognitive faculties to be considered reliable, that they must be a part of a good design plan that is aimed at truth. And so, if one, for example, is a naturalist and they believe that our cognitive faculties are the result of survival or a random chance, then they aren't really aimed at truth. Therefore, they cannot be considered reliable. So, the naturalist really has no foundation upon which to use logic and reason, whereas the theist does, especially in the Christian worldview, whereas God obviously wants us to get to know Him through creation and through his work, and therefore our cognitive faculties can be considered reliable within the Christian worldview. And also Plantinga critiques evidentialism, which is this idea that you should only believe something if there's an adequate amount of evidence. Well, of course, that's a value statement. Where is the evidence for that? And he also says that God is a properly basic belief that you can believe in, because most people, believe in some sort of God. Whether, not now the specifics when it comes to Christianity is something else, but most people have a connection that there is something beyond the material world, that there's something divine, and there's no reason to doubt that. Just as you wouldn't doubt knowledge of the exterior world or knowledge of the past and all these other things. And so he considers God to be a properly basic belief. So I really love Plantinga because he's now I don't claim to understand all of what he's written, especially, and this is only a condensed version, but I am, because again I'm only an amateur, but I am trying my best. But I do think that it is very important for especially writers and creative people to have. And I will say that Flanagan also is a very eloquent writer at times, because he also talks about how one can get a sense of God through beauty, through nature. He has some very descriptive scenes where he's describing mountains and the Grand Tetons, and he uses a word like supernal, which is a word that I really love, and I'm surprised that he used that. But so he can be an eloquent writer when he wants to be, but he also makes a point that if we are created beings, then art can have more value, because we're essentially imitating, our creator who created us. Well, whereas if we're just kind of random beings created by chance, then creativity in some sense doesn't have as much meaning or value. So I really loved his book for all of these reasons, and I would highly recommend reading it, especially if you want to learn more about the foundations of a worldview and epistemology.